Next up is Binalakshmi Nepram, who is representing the International Peace Bureau of Manipur Women's Gun Survivors Network. Binalakshmi, over to you, please.
First of all, greetings to everyone. I want to acknowledge the raging grandmothers. In fact, the reason is in 2017, I met one of the people who were imprisoned. Her name is Martha Hennessy, the granddaughter of Dorothy Day. We spent time together. We went to Coney Island and she introduced me to Corn Dog. And Walter, who's here in the room, was also here with us. I work very closely with Frida Berrigan for many, many years on the issue. These are extraordinary people who have dedicated their entire lives for disarmament, yet we do not hear about them as much as we would like them to be. I remember Martha being arrested just next to the UN, and till today she remains in jail. So again, I would like to remember each one of these brave hearts who have done their all beyond measures. So, secondly, I would like to greet every one of you in my indigenous language, Mayambu Taramna Okjari. My obeisance to each and every one of you. I also pay my respects to the Lenape people on whose indigenous lands we are here today. Let us remember our ancestors, past and present, without which we will not be here. It's their energy, it's their strength and resilience which guides each and every one of us today, and including myself. Yes, Mona Lisa mentioned, I am also the Senior Advisor on Indigenous Issues at the United States Institute of Peace, but I'm here, and my colleague is here, Sandra, but I'm today here speaking on my personal capacity. Yeah. In 1990s, UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali, remember him? He actually coined a term. He said that it is not nuclear weapons which are killing people every day, it's small arms and light weapons. 800,000 people are killed every year. Thousands in this same country right here. If weapons could make people secure, America, with the largest weapons, should be the most secure country in the world. But it isn't. That's the reality. And my country, India, where I come from, which is the world's largest importer of weapons, should also be the safest country in the world. But right now, we are a country which is still in turmoil. So you may have practiced yoga for peace, but the country which gave yoga to the world is not in peace at the moment. The reason I say this is it was exactly the starting point of how the United Nations, where we are very close, started work on mapping on what Boutros Ghali called micro-disarmament. Because the word disarmament usually refers to nuclear disarmament. But in 1994, it was that year it turned around to nuclear micro-disarmament. So nuclear plus non-nuclear became a very critical part. That's what I wanted to say. The other aspect is, because I have just 2 more minutes left, I know it's short time. 3 more, okay, hopefully. So who else in the world knows about the pain of arms proliferation, both nuclear and small arms, than indigenous people? I would like to take a moment. How many millions have died around the world? And currently, in my own home state, Manipur, where 300 were shot dead last year, and continues to be in a war, where our homes have become war sites. I'll give you a data, which we research at USIP. 80% of the world's conflict, 80, are currently happening in biodiversity hotspots, where indigenous people live. Yet peace talks, peace negotiations, and disarmament meetings do not include us. I have been in 2 meetings today, and I'm the last speaker now, and I was the last speaker in the first one. Just to tell. In short, what is happening? Many of you, I think you mentioned about Kiribati and Kazakhstan. Many indigenous lands are the dumping ground of nuclear waste. The Navajo territories, Australian Aboriginal sites, Northeast of India, Meghalaya. In these many parts of our indigenous areas have become the testing ground for nuclear sites and the dumping ground of toxic waste. Children have been formed maldeformed. That's why in 2019 I was at Columbia University with hundreds of thousands of indigenous people, and we have coined the term environmental violence, which is now adopted by the UN, to talk about the special way in which indigenous lands have been disproportionately become sites of environmental violence by states and multinational corporations. This is something that I want us, all of us, to remember. The other thing, we talked about Ukraine, we talk about what's happening in Middle East, but there are 106 other conflicts, 107 conflicts in the world, and 117 million currently displaced. So these are the different things as we remember. Please do not just remember the wars which are in your television sets. There are wars which you don't even know and hear about. These are called world's forgotten crises. I come from one such war zone. Until today, for the last 15 years to 20 years, we have been coming to the UN. And raging grannies, you are right. We are utterly unhappy and disappointed in which things have been working globally. It is not working. But we cannot give up hope. Because I always tell my people back home in Manipur that if you have parents at home, the government should be like your second set of parents. And I say the United Nations are like your grandparents. There is nothing in the world where you come and convene together. That power and that sacred thing, we cannot give up, however difficult it may be. I usually use UN documents. They are the best ideal documents you find here. In terms of action on the ground, you have to find your own ways. That's what. And finally, I just wanted to share that in terms of disarmament and this particular conference on disarmament, in Geneva we have what is known as a CD, the Conference on Disarmament. It's been there. It's not that disarmament has not been there at the UN for decades. It's there. We have UNODA, and I know many of the people who are there. In Geneva, you have UNIDIR. There are lots of UN agencies, and because Japan funds the most, I don't know if anyone from Japan here, you usually have a Japanese leading the disarmament at the UN. But the thing is, the UN is as good as its member countries wants it to be. It's a product of World War II. And it will do what, as a result, as many have said, in today's world of rising wars, how are we going to strategically and smartly get the UN to work around is something we have to think and idea together. Because in the indigenous peoples movement, it took from 1920s till 1997, 19 to 1920, before even the beginning of the UN and the League of Nations, till 1997, it took the indigenous people around the world this decades to get the first UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and we made that happen. And we owed it to the Haudenosaunee people who ensured they went to Geneva and ensured they have a right to be represented. So there are things, and even in the international campaign to ban landmines, there are many disarmament movements. Some of them succeeded, some of them have used us also in the global south. But many have succeeded, including the international campaign to ban. Let's learn from the good examples and try to change the way things are. That's one thing when I would like to caution as we move forward. It's not going to be easy at this time, because you know what? War profits, peace doesn't. It's a military-industrial complex, clubbed with humanitarian-industrial complex, which is skewed to the global north, Mona Lisa. We will have to work with our supportive sisters and brothers from global north and global south around the world to be able to bring that transformation. So it's not going to be an easy journey, but we can make it happen, Zara. Don't be disappointed. We will make it work. And finally, I would like to state that the other example is a friend of mine, Fred Lubang, is doing his research in Cambodia on the term called decolonizing disarmament. And I will not be wrong to say I put that idea in his head. The reason is, I think it's really important that we have to look at ways of working, decolonizing disarmament, to make disarmament meaningful on the lives of people on the ground. The Summit of the Future is very critical element, and I'm so glad that at least certain languages is there. But I think, as one of our participants said, of the 2 trillion amount, Chloe said, of military expenditure, if you get 10% out of that, you can actually reduce poverty in the world by 2030, was what we said 10 years ago. But rather, it only increased. So that's something that we will have to continuously work with supportive communities, governments. There are governments who are aligned to ensure that we have built sustainable societies, because sustainable peace brings about sustainable democracies, which will ensure that we have stable societies. People will not migrate, they will stay in their homes if they are not bombed in their regions. So they are all aligned, all of these. And finally, our call is, please include indigenous people, put them in the heart of what you're doing on disarmament. Number 2, put survivors at the heart of what we do. We started the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. I'm a scholar by training, but we can become professors or academicians based on our research, but what happens to people on ground zero? So we set up, because we have to put food on the table for them, ensure that their children go to school, ensure that they get the justice they deserve. Because human rights or disarmament cannot happen on empty stomachs. We cannot think that we can do our workshops while we know people are struggling through their emotions, their mental health, their spiritual health. Very important, spiritualism, to bring in spiritualism in what we do. And finally, I think it's really important that we learn from indigenous people. We may think we haven't created the next theory, but did you know that the Haudenosaunee people have evolved the great law of peace? This was done in the 12th century, and we have buried it under our feet. We must go back to indigenous nations and people and their wisdom and their love and the care for people and environment alike. Do you know, in New Zealand they have created, the Wangana River have become a legal entity, because without rivers, civilizations don't thrive. If we pollute it, we die with the rivers. The Wanganui, the Maori people said, I am the river and the river is me. So I want to thank everyone, and to be able to find the peace within as we do this work, because this peace and disarmament work is not easy. You will be threatened, you will be questioned. I have gone through 20 years of this struggle, believing in peace and disarmament, threatened state, by non-state, but yet we have continued to stay resilient, to know that this work is so important. So please take care of yourselves as you do this work. As I said, peace and disarmament is not a project, it's a commitment of a lifetime, and just like the Raging Grannies have shown us, our mothers in Manipur have also shown, in northeast of India have shown us what it takes, decades and decades of work to be able to bring that change that we wish to see, and we will bring that change. Intergeneration, working intergenerationally, learning from one another, and keeping that faith that peace is our pathway, not war. Only a few engineer war. If they can engineer war, we can engineer peace and disarmament. Thank you.